Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. My name's Jane Baylor, and as ever, I have an incredible guest for you tonight. Welcome, David Brier.
Well, thank you so much, Jane. Appreciate it.
So great to have you here, David. So David is a slayer of the mundane. He's Google's #1 rebranding expert. We're going to talk about that in a while. And the founder of DBD International, which helps businesses build gravity-defying brands around the world. He's a passionate advocate for customer experience as the defining metric of brand success. He's the author of a book called Brand Intervention, and he's advised A-listers such as Grant Cardone and Damon John from Shark Tank, who call him brilliant with branding and a branding genius. Now, many people think that branding is about marketing, advertising, and visibility. It's not. So in this inspiring discussion, we're going to get right into what sustainable brand success actually looks like today and why it matters so much. So, David, over to you, slayer of the mundane. What exactly does that mean?
Well, having worked with thousands of companies of all shapes, sizes, locations, and industries, there was basically a recurring theme, which was, it's really in the noisy world we live in, there's no shortage. Like if someone's like, oh, I've got fill in the blank, a sneaker, a wearable, an app, a new technological solution, a new subscription service, whatever. There's many others to choose from, right? There's no lack of options.
No.
So it's a matter of like, well, how do you do that? How do you actually come out and not just be sound like a mundane, sound like just okay, another company or service or individual saying how great they are.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you do that? So that's the thing. So it just kind of became a natural, organic name, a little moniker, and it was even something that when I was just looking here, yeah, even this I put together for a speaking gig, and you'll see it's an actual coin. It's a large, heavy, hard sculpted thing, but you'll see above my image says Slayer of the Mundane right in there.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I love it. Slayer of the mundane. I
Yes.
mean, I sometimes talk about also rans. And I mean, you're right, because we do live in a really, really busy world. And isn't it just so important to be perceived as different and more interesting, really, than other brands, businesses, people, or whatever?
Exactly.
That's the game, isn't it?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so what we're gonna get into is the how.
Okay.
So
Well,
what are your top tips?
here's something that I educate every client that I work with on, which is that different is better than better.
Mm,
Every client I speak with, every company I speak with, they're always like, "Well, we have the best, blah 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 blah," and I'm like, "Okay, tell me why." I'll always open the door and invite them to say, "Tell me why I, as a prospective client or customer, should choose you." And I listen and they go over and they talk about we're not the knowledge and the blood, sweat, and tears and the this and the that and the research and the blah and the blah. And I'm like, and when they're done, I ask them this. I say, why do I know if I went to any one of your competitors right now that they would basically tell me kind of their version of what you just told me?
mhm.
I said, is that real to you that would actually occur? And all of a sudden they go, no. That's your problem. It's not the factor of did what you say, was it true? It's not, was it true? Was it untrue? Was it more true? Etc. If you're playing that, so that the whole thing is that so many companies are playing, well, we're better and here's why.
Mhm.
Well, the bottom line is if you actually come out of the gate and you actually do something that's unexpected, that's not something that they were able to foresee, and you made them stop and go, what? and actually take notice, because being, like you talked about, being an echo chamber, you don't want to basically regurgitate what others have said. You don't want to basically be just sort of like a me too, like, oh, that's one more flavor of what I've already heard about 5, 10, or 20 or 50 times.
Yep.
That's not a strong way to establish. So the first thing is you have to embrace branding in its essence. I do cover that in my book, where there wasn't one single definition that everybody could agree on what is this thing called branding. So I brought it down to 4 words: the art of differentiation. So the
Lovely.
art of differentiation. So if I notice something that's different, if I notice something, and there's so many things that we could do that are different. It could be the way that it's delivered. It could be the materials that are used. It could be the sleekness of experience, the use of design. And obviously, the more differences one brings, the more memorable, the more outstanding, the more someone's going to say, wow. I remember, like, if you look at like the Dyson vacuum cleaners, I always found that fascinating, how, for 50, 60 years, nothing had changed in the space of vacuum cleaners, except for the external chassis. It was the same bag, had the same suction. Okay. Now, all of a sudden, Dyson comes around and he has this whole turbine technology. But not only is it turbine technology, now it's, wait a second, you can see it, the turbine technology. But not only can you see it when you're actually doing the vacuuming, you can see it in these cool colors, in purple or this or that. So it's like, so he's using see-through materials, different materials than anything else, a different thing. So he used design, he used experience, and all these various things. And he brought out so many points of difference. He didn't just come out and say, we're the better vacuum cleaner, which is what many companies do. We're the better, and fill in the blank. Hey, you've got competition. We're the better consultancy. We're the better advisor. We're the better coach. We're the better writer. Everyone's playing the better game. Move the dial.
I really, really love that. And of course, you're really big on brand differentiation being an experiential thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is absolutely fascinating. And was it Jeff Bezos says that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room, right?
Right.
And of course, the experience of using Amazon, whatever people think about Amazon, experientially, it's actually changed the world, hasn't it? Really?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and here's the interesting thing too, that not everybody knows. For people who've been in business for a while, they understand it. But Sears, Sears was an interesting company, which unfortunately Sears didn't move with the times and the changes in culture and technology. But what did Sears do? When Sears came out way back when, they looked, there are these little towns. There weren't big department stores at the time. So let's look at the context. So what was happening? It's like, well, there were these small towns and you might have 2 or 3 places to shop, but there weren't any big department stores which had all varieties of things. So they looked at, well, if you wanted to maybe get a particular item, you might have to travel 50 or 70 miles. That was kind of an inconvenience. So they looked at something. Brilliant observation. Everyone has a mailbox.
Yeah.
Everyone receives mail. What if, instead of getting people to have to go shopping, what if we brought shopping to them via this thing called the mailbox? So they came out with the Sears catalog, which at its peak, I think it was 500 pages. And not everybody knows this, but Sears even sold houses. You could actually open up and you can say, oh, I want that house, and have that house delivered to you. So, but what was interesting was, however many years later, probably 60 years later or something of that nature, Amazon noticed the same thing. Right now, yes, he started with books, but that was only because books, and I remember listening to an interview with Jeff Bezos. It was only because books covered, you could have books about cooking, you could have books about fantasy, you could have books about sci-fi, you could have books about legal thrillers or crime stories or whatever. So the category of books, while one category, had so many different types of audiences. So, but they realized everybody, like Sears realized everyone had a mailbox, Amazon realized everybody has a desktop. What if we actually brought the store to them? So in other words, it was actually realizing There was a shift in the landscape of
Mm.
the lives that we all led. And so it literally was the exact same replication of what Sears did half a century before, and Sears could have been Amazon if they just were paying attention. So it's just a matter of recognizing and seeing where do people live, what actually can change the dynamic of how people shop and how things become available.
Wow, I mean, this conversation is absolutely blowing my mind. I love this stuff. So is this about creative destruction?
Yeah, well, I don't use the word destruction. I use like creative disruption. I use disruption in place of,
Disruption.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely, because look, it's everything today that you and I take for granted was at one point an innovation,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's our smartphones, or
Mhm.
whether it's the lights in the ceiling, or whether it's anything. Each of these was at one point an innovation. Someone looked at the way things were and says, well, can it be a little bit different? Isn't there an easier way? Isn't there a faster way? Isn't there a way to harness, convert this kind of energy into this kind of energy? So maybe motion could be turned into electrical, or very. So it's like, why not? Like that's disruption. And
Uh-huh.
so, you know, so I mean, it wasn't so many years ago then even the idea of you and I having this conversation right now in real time. You and I are talking. You're in one part of the world, I'm in this part of the world, and we're not having to jump through hoops to have a live conversation that's distributed to thousands of people around the world.
Yeah, which is I mean, it is actually kind of mind-blowing really, isn't it?
Yeah,
As you said, you're in the Midwest, I'm here just outside London. It's broadcasting to all these different channels. We already had this discussion that, 20% of my audience are outside the US and the UK, and I have audiences in places like Gambia, Croatia, Sri Lanka. I check the stats.
yeah,
Isn't it incredible, really, that we are able to sit in these respective places and actually influence, people and bring value to people in those countries? It just blows my mind constantly.
yeah,
It's really amazing the power of podcasting.
yeah,
But podcasting, a few years ago, nobody had a podcast, did they? Or it was just, you and now, it's very, very, it's amazing, it's very mainstream, but
yeah,
as you said, somebody had to invent that, didn't they?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, to me, it's just there's always the opportunity. I always look at every interaction, whether it's this discussion or whether it's working with a client or anything. It's like, why leave it at extraordinary? Why just show up? So I always ask myself, how do I convert this into something extraordinary? How do I make this memorable? How do I make this unexpected? How do I surprise the recipient so that
Mhm.
they go, that was freaking cool, right? Because once they get a taste of that, you've now shifted the level of expectation, right? And either you're just meeting expectation, and that's true for all of us who are in business and entrepreneurs. We're either just meeting expectation. Like no one's going to reward you for saying hello, right? It's like they're not going to go, that was the most amazing hello, Jane. That was remarkable. You changed my life. That was incredible. I don't, unless maybe you have that kind of hello, but the likelihood of just saying hello is not good. But if you do something unexpected and you bring something unexpected, I mean, I'll give you a perfect simple example. It's not an outrageous example, but it gives an idea of what's the level of expectation. And one of the things is like there's the DoubleTree hotel chain.
Yeah.
Last I had checked, they heat up in their little microwaves 83,000 chocolate chip cookies a day for their guests every day. That's the last count. Maybe now it's more or it's less depending on seasons and stuff like that. But people who their customer base, when they go to the DoubleTree, they get more free PR because nobody, you think, what? Nobody in the hospitality space does that. So they
No.
do this one thing. A warm chocolate chip cookie that you get and you can expect and you can rely on. You arrive, you're gonna have your freaking warm chocolate chip cookie, and and people take photographs and they share it on social media and all kinds. They talk to others. They say, and it's like, and it's a talking point. I mean, it's only because others aren't doing that. They're not stepping up to the plate. It would be so easy to change that, but it's these little points of difference. They make arriving a special experience rather than, okay, you arrived. I said hello. I said welcome. I said, is there anything you need or want in your room? Which is all the usual. They
Yeah.
went that one little step farther. If we do enough of those on a continuous basis, just enough extra steps, we become known as that individual who raises the bar, who always gives more,
Oh,
who
yeah.
leaves you smiling.
Oh, I totally get that. That is just, so fantastic and so inspiring. I was actually thinking as you were talking, there's a chain here in the UK called Premier Inn. I don't know, they probably don't know. I don't know if they have them in the US, but basically their tagline is a good night's sleep guaranteed. And they make their own beds, and you can actually buy a Premier Inn bed. And the thing is, you know how most people, they go to hotels and they're like, I'm not going to be in my own bed. I'm going to have a terrible night's sleep. I'm going to be tossing and turning. And all. So it's like addresses the primary anxiety that people have about not being at home. And so, I mean, I'm very loyal to that brand. If I go away, it's like I definitely want to be in a Premier Inn because it's lodged in my brain, a good night's sleep guaranteed, and that kind of expectation, um, it's very, very, psychologically motivating, isn't it?
Yeah,
Once
yeah,
it beds in.
yeah. Well, there's even my wife and I some years ago. We were I think we had a layover, and one of our pieces of luggage, it was one of those layovers where you collect. Oh yeah, because we were going international. One of the pieces of luggage kind of got a little mangled, so we're getting it in our layover, and then we have to walk it over. And I looked at it, and she looked at it, and I'm like, "What the hell? This is ridiculous. At least once a year, we have to replace one, two, or three pieces of luggage. It's because they just get mangled." And I'm like, so we ended up going to this place. We're looking around, and we see the usual thing. We see the Toro, and we see the Samsonite. We see all the usual ones, and then there's this brand that we had never heard of before, and it says, "Our zippers are guaranteed for the life that you own it. For the life, if your zipper ever breaks while you own it, we will replace it free of charge."
Oh.
And we were like, seriously? I'm like, seriously? And so we're looking at the craftsmanship. We're like, this stuff is made quite well. And we're looking and seeing, and we start looking it up on our smartphones, and the reviews are great. And the brand is called Briggs and Riley, right?
Oh,
And we were like, and we have never since ever bought any other brand of luggage. We occasionally go, oh, you know what? We could use another block, but we don't buy pieces to replace anymore. We now just buy pieces to augment what we already have. But that was it. Just that one. Now that was like, that's why it comes back full circle. Different is better than better. Better means we're playing according to the same rules that have already been
yeah.
set. We're already in the same sandbox. Different is like, hey, you know what? New set of rules, new set of expectations, a whole new game.
Yeah, yeah, and I was just thinking as you were talking, Brabantia, bins, I remember when they came out, these are kind of like sleek Italian bins, and they're quite expensive.
Yeah,
Trash cans, you call them obviously
yeah,
in the US,
exactly.
right? But the promise was that, this is so well made that the lids will never break, and if they ever do, we're just gonna replace them free of charge. And I'm like, "This sounds really good." Well, of course, they do break, and so I got like, when they did, I phoned them up, I said, "Look, the lid's broken." They said, "Send it back, we'll replace it free of charge."
Yeah,
And they did. And, yeah, that is another example, isn't it,
yeah,
of, okay, I'll pay more for the bin. I won't just go for the cheap trash can that anybody can get. I will pay more to have my Brabantia bin because, they go above and beyond. And I get exactly what you say. It's just such an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
It really is. Wow. So A-listers such as Grant Cardone and Damon John from Shark Tank. So they call you brilliant with branding and a branding genius. So, look, I mean, that's quite something, isn't it? So how did that all come about? I mean, do they phone you up and say, David, you are a branding genius, brilliant with branding, or what?
It was slightly different than that, but
Okay.
here's how it worked. Basically, is now I know that isn't it right that in the UK you have Dragon's Den as opposed to Shark
Yeah,
Tank,
yeah,
right?
Dragon's Den, yeah.
Okay. So Shark Tank is Dragon's Den still popular there?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay. So because Shark Tank, I think they just got into the 12th or 13th season. So 10, 12, 13 years, something like that. Probably about 2.5, 3 years into Shark Tank. Shark Tank was a guilty pleasure that my wife and I just loved. We just loved the show. We're like, oh, this is cool. We love the pitches. We love the negotiations, the contest between who's going to make what offer and why, and this, that, the other.
Yeah.
So after about a year and a half, something like that, I looked at it and I was like, I wanted to write an article, and I had it published in my Fast Company column online. And so I wrote an article basically on what are the points that someone goes in there, they're swimming with the sharks. How do you not get eaten alive and instead own the room? Right. That was
Mm.
my question. So I looked
Yeah.
at what are the qualities and characteristics. So I wrote this article. I had no expectation of the factor that maybe others would enjoy these observations like I am seeing what I'm seeing in the show. Within about a day or two, I see a tweet from Damon John, who at the time I didn't know, other
Mhm.
than seeing him on the show. And he says, "This is the best article written on Shark Tank ever." And I was
Wow.
And I I immediately retweeted it and I said, "Thanks, man." I was like, "That's awesome."
Yeah.
And it very much felt like something that didn't sound like something that an assistant of his would say. It was very much he read it, he dug it, he was like, boom. And so I immediately my creative juices started immediately going. And I'm going, this is an incredible opportunity. Wow, this is an open door that I didn't anticipate or expect, but I was like, that's great. So I thought to myself, what could happen here? What could be done? So I thought, I said I'd love to actually interview Damon and have him, do an article on him, just do that. That would be cool. So I said, Damon, I said, you need a slogan. I said, you deserve an amazing slogan. I said, you're too cool and you're too stylish, you're too hip. He goes, awesome, like what? So I mean, this is all happening on Twitter messages back and forth. And I said, because I already had thought of it, I said, a Damon is a girl's best friend. And he goes, love it. I remember he goes, love it, because it was a great headline. I was like, and so we did the interview. I used that as the headline. It was a great headline. And then we just started to just sort of like, hey, are there opportunities and things for us to a synergy here, and so that's basically how that relationship started. Then on the Grant side, again, it was one of those things where someone had asked and said, "Hey, David, I'd love to have you on. I'd love to have you on a podcast. It was a different platform at the time. It's no longer around,
Mhm.
but it was kind of like it was very hot. It was really the thing to be on." So he goes, and he's going, I'm a Fortune. He goes, I'm a Fortune. I write for Fortune. I have a Fortune column for Fortune magazine. I said, okay. I said, he goes, so he wanted to interview me. I said, that's cool. I said, let me see if I could bring someone in. I said, I have people in my circles. I have people in my network. So let me see if I could bring someone in. So I reach out to Grant, who I knew more as an acquaintance. We weren't tight. And I said, I'd love to actually invite you to join us because, here's the opportunity for exposure and this, that, the other. because I know the value of PR. Everyone
Yeah.
knows the value of PR.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, all right. I said, here, this can be unfortunate. Da, 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 da. And he was like, cool. He was okay. Yeah, that sounds. I'd love to do that. So that happens, and then he immediately, and this is one of the things that I found both Grant and Damon share.
Mhm.
They're very reciprocal.
Uh-huh.
They reciprocate, and so Grant
Wow.
immediately said, "Hey, you know what? I want to have you as a guest on Power Players. It's a show that he'd had." And I said, "That's awesome." And so he goes, "Let me coordinate with this person." Da, 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 and so we made it happen. So that's how it happened, and that's how we got to know everyone on that basis. But it was just literally, it was being present, it was being attentive, it was being intentional in terms of giving.
Mhm.
It wasn't being intentional in terms of, I'm going to do this so that I can get that. Right? That would be very calculated.
Yep,
I
manipulative.
like the word intentional better than calculated.
Yep.
And so it's like, I'm very intentional that, hey, if I'm going to take time to showcase someone, I want to showcase someone who is in some way going to add to the conversation, whether it's by the example or by their influence or by their sphere of scope, that the problems that they solve. But and those are kind of like my little criteria points.
Yeah, and I really like that, and obviously the name of this podcast is The Smart Connector, because for me, all about, connecting smartly is really all about, giving value. Obviously, you've just mentioned 2 extremely successful guys who are very quick to reciprocate. That isn't, it's not accidental. That is their modus operandi.
Yeah,
They know, networks, your network is your net worth, and people that are very successful understand that.
yeah.
And so they build networks. That's what they do. I think it was, I can't remember whether it was Warren Buffett that said this. It's somebody, but basically the wealthiest and the most successful people in the world, they build networks, that don't they? That's what they do. They're very strategic around their relationships, but they approach them with an attitude of giving value first.
100%. And I had a very similar experience with Claude Silver, who was Gary Vaynerchuk's number 2, right?
Uh-huh.
And again, I saw some videos and I just was like, who is this remarkable individual? I was like, I
Mhm.
immediately absolutely just went head over heels with, I just loved her just her space. Her space was just there's a graciousness, and there's a kindness, and it's deep. It's not a
Mhm.
shallow. It's not a shallow. I mean, you can look at various different people in media, and you could say, well, who's deep and who's shallow? Who's
Mhm.
shallow? Who's just playing a little politics and just like a little. You could tell how they're playing stuff. It's a little manipulated, but she was
Yeah.
just deep, right? Without an agenda. And I was like, God, who the hell is this? I'm like, holy shit. I was
Oh,
I was stunned. And so I just sent her just thanked her for being a remarkable example of an individual in the
oh,
world. And
brilliant.
and no expectation. No expectation. And I think it was 3 or 4 days later, she responded. She goes, "Oh my God, what an incredible thing that you said." I mean, it was the most vulnerable, just like there was no kind of, I'm Claude Silver or anything like that. It wasn't anything like that because she doesn't have
Mhm.
that. And so
Yeah.
it was just so vulnerable. She goes, "My God, we should jump on a call." And I was like,
Oh,
"That would be awesome. I'd
yeah.
love to jump on a call with you." And that was basically how it started. So, and now we're just we're the dearest of friends. And so it's just interesting where these things start. If you start with a real give, not a shallow give, not a, hey, let me do this and see if you have that little appended thing of like, and let me see if, no, that's now that you've now added something to that
Oh,
that will
totally.
tarnish the purity of that gesture.
Oh, I'm so with you on that, David. It's so refreshing to be able to speak to somebody that really gets that, because I feel very, very passionate about the topic of connection as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, amazing, amazing. So David, what I'd like to go on to next is Google's number one rebranding expert. I mean, Google's number one rebranding expert. That's quite something, isn't it? So, would you like to tell the story of how you became the number one rebranding expert on Google?
Well, basically, what ended up happening, it was actually by accident that I discovered this, and there was an article that I had written some years ago, and it was like how to rebrand 19 questions to ask before you start.
Uh-huh.
And because I was finding that when companies rebrand, some of them were approaching it very, very with really bad reasons. It might be there was a new CEO who just didn't like the flavor and just wanted to, or there was some other little silly reason, or they're approaching it for merely a cosmetic. They weren't looking deep into like, who are we? What's our role in the world? How rebrands, if they're done properly, are about the future. They're not
Yeah.
just about the past. It's not just like sugarcoating. I'll call it the sugarcoating a turd. It's not sugarcoating a turd. It's not. It's like no. We're actually going. We're doing something real here. It's like is this what we would call ourselves if we were starting today? Would we call ourselves this way? Is this the narrative that we would
Mhm.
have? So these are the kinds. So I'm seeing a lot of misfires on the part of companies. I would notice them, and there would be these crazy disasters. And so I started writing down this list of questions. Um, these are things that if I was doing a rebrand, this is what I absolutely would ask, having worked on and built many successful rebrands
Mhm.
in to the point of the basically well in excess of $7 billion in business has been generated by the companies that I've rebranded.
Mhm.
So, and they're from small companies to multi-million-dollar companies,
Mhm.
and some even billion-dollar companies.
Yeah.
And so I wrote that, and somehow, by some fluke, it was brought to my attention. Hey, David, this article is ranking on page one of you know, Google, and I'm like, so I think I just Googled rebranding, and I was right. I was like, I looked in disbelief. I was like the number two number two result, like after like something number one or number two result, and I was like, holy crap! And so that was really, it was a matter of like kind of being in the right place at the right time, and putting out content that was there for adding value, not for just coming up with, hey, I'll come up with an article that has a number in the headline and I'm making wonderful little lists of things. It wasn't, again, I think it's the purity of intention really does. Even though I never want anyone to feel entitled because they've done good. I'm not an advocate of that anyone's entitled to anything. It's like, if you're doing good, yeah, do you deserve to be rewarded? Yes. But do you deserve it, as in entitled, as in now you're going to sulk if it doesn't happen? No. That's not how the game is played. Keep doing good. Keep doing good. Keep delivering value. Yes, absolutely. And if there were such a thing as karma, I think it's rewarded when our intention is pure, and we're just doing things with a high degree of not just self-awareness, but just awareness. You know, right now, I'm as aware of myself as I am about you, as I am about the audience that's listening to this, that's really enjoying the conversation. I'm paying attention to all of that. If I was only paying attention to myself, this would be a very one-sided conversation. If I was only listening to you and not really listening to, if I was only listening to the words and not really listening to, what do you want to know? What can I add value to? I'd only be able to offer, very moderate value. And again, being attentive. So these are the kinds of things that I pay attention to.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I was just thinking about, when sometimes I do a little bit of research on Google, I'm like stuck. I'm thinking like, what shall I write about this topic? So, that's what you do, isn't it? You type something in. And like I read these articles and they are so dull because they have been written just with SEO in mind. So those kind of SEO driven articles, they're
Yeah,
just bilge most of the time. And so when you go out there with something, I can imagine that your article, I'm definitely going to look it up, but I'm sure that it was absolutely, as you said, written from the heart without kind of like, okay, we've got to say rebranding in the first, 3 sentences 6 times or whatever it is, that
yeah,
I've been instructed by people, "Well, you should be writing these SEO articles," and it's like, I just can't contort myself into this horrible framework.
yeah,
It's just, because it will not produce sustainable success. Who would want to put their name to an article that is just badly written? That is gonna be damaging to your brand. Yes, it may get you up the rankings, but it's not gonna help, is it?
right. No, no, and and I am a firm believer that people do detect. I mean, I know the people that I attract that where my message and my way of framing the discussions resonates with those people. I mean, I do attract those who are rebellious, who are defiant. They don't there's a restlessness. They want to actually achieve some good things in the world.
Yeah.
They're not just happy with, okay, they're getting their paycheck or they're getting their ROI.
Mm.
ROI is fine, but it was when I realized there was a client of mine, and this is when I realized the difference that I could make in the world
Yep.
was a client who we were having lunch, and he said thank you, just kind of out of the blue, and I was like, what? He goes, because of you and because of what we did together, um, I was actually able to donate $50 million to humanitarian causes that I support.
Oh, what? Wow. That's just
And and I was like, I was stunned.
yeah, who wouldn't be?
It's not just a matter, can I make any entrepreneur wealthy? Yes. Can I create a successful brand for them? Yes. Is that the finish line? No. The loneliest and most miserable entrepreneurs I've ever met are the ones where it's where the arrows are only going in one direction in their pockets, because to see how many zeros or commas they can add to their net worth.
Mhm.
If it's not reciprocating, if it's not flowing outward and through society, and if all that's not happening, um, my help to them, it's unsatisfying, it's miserable, and they are the most miserable people I've ever actually seen in business, because it's a lonely person's island. They're on an island of one. Ugh, it's dismal.
Yeah, and of course, but it's proven that purpose-driven businesses are much more successful anyway than just profit-driven businesses, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so I mean, that completely aligns with your brand growth and as having a sustainable kind of exciting brand,
yeah,
because isn't that really all about your well, as I said, we've talked about the difference, but I mean, the difference is also very integral to the purpose, isn't it, of
yeah.
a business?
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, this is so exciting. I'm just loving this conversation. This is like really right into my sweet spot. I just love this stuff. So tell us about your book. When you why did you decide to write a book, and what's the driving force or the driving idea behind the book?
You talking about this book?
Oh my
Is that
god,
is
I
that
love that hat. Oh my god, did you have that specially made, or did you buy it somewhere, or
No, no, I had this specially made. I
it's
had this
very
specially made.
blingy.
Oh, it's completely blingy. It's
Yeah,
absolutely, it's shamelessly blingy. There's
it
no
really
question.
is. Yeah, you can put that on if you like for the rest of our interview. Yeah.
Sure. I'll wear it for a bit. For those who've never seen me, but basically, what had happened was after being in business for about 35 years, I was like, my God, I kept on looking and saying, I keep on hearing the same questions, the same confusions, the same misconceptions of what's possible or what's or blind spots.
Mhm.
And it didn't matter if my client had been in business for 30 or 40 years or 3 or 4 years, didn't matter. Because whenever I discounted, and whenever I'd go, oh, I'm not going to mention this because it's obvious, they already know, they've been a bit. Anytime I would discount it, it would always bite me in the ass, like within either a day or a week, and this blind spot would be this gaping hole. And so I was like, oh my God, I said, I've got to put this down. I've got to put this down so that people can actually have, and part of it. So it was a matter of one, telling it in an unfluffy way, meaning I did not write 25 pages of something that actually could be said in 2 pages. If it could be said in 2 pages, I wrote it. So I wrote it in a very, very New York straight up style. I designed it in a very straight up style, and the last 50 pages I showed you. Now that you understand all the different principles, here it is in action. Here are these in action. And so, but just to show you, this is the size of the type. This is the size. This is how it works. Okay, and so this is it's huge, and that is the way. And here I'll show. This is the there you go, like that. There we have that's how this works. And so I love the fact people went nuts over the fact of how there's practically an entire chapter. Okay, bang. It's like and no, it's not shallow. It's just concentrated and deep. And so my favorite paragraph, my favorite chapter, 2 sentences long. It's 2 sentences long. I'll actually read this to you.
Yeah, read it. Yeah.
You'll see how it's chapter 26, and there we go. All right, perfect. So here, good versus great. Okay, there's the chapter. I'll read it to you.
Oh wow, yeah, read it.
Okay, so this side says a good brand makes us feel good about what they stand for. A great brand makes us feel good about what we stand for.
Oh yeah, I like that. That's amazing. That's so nice.
And so now, could I have written 30 pages to extrapolate on that? Sure. But personally, I came from the school of, you know what? I value my time.
Mm-hmm.
I value the time of the reader.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I going to make you? And here's the other thing. There was a little pet peeve that underscored my writing the book. I was tired of these 300-page books, business books, that always in the middle, I always found the 10 or 12 pages that had the really good stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The stuff that came up before it was preamble or literary foreplay, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then the stuff afterward was extrapolation based on that. But it was but there was always somewhere in there was that's what I wanted to know. That's it. That's all I need. And so I'm going, if that happens, and every time I mention that to people, everyone are like, yeah. It's not an alien concept. That's yeah. So I'm like, you know what? Okay. So that's where it became, I'm going to have, so it literally says on the back cover, it says the first book written for CEOs, entrepreneurs, and brands that don't have time to read a book on branding.
Oh yeah, I really like that, and I think that's very, very powerful because, like you, you have got very frustrated over the years, and in fact, I think it's kind of probably happening a bit less now because I think people's time is just so valuable. But you're right. Like 10, 15 years ago, there were so many business books, or before that, they were just basically written around one idea, one basic concept.
Yeah.
And it's like Atomic Habits was one that I was talking about the other day. So what is Atomic Habits all about? Well, what it's saying is that, the impact of what you do every day is going to form your identity, and it's going to have a massive impact on your life. Right. There's a very basic idea, really.
Yeah.
But do I need to read a whole book about it? It's a very good book, but it's a very long book for that one idea.
Yeah.
So,
I had
and
a,
I think,
yeah,
yeah.
I had a similar experience. I had a similar experience with a very, very, very well-known, I'll leave it unnamed at this point, but it was a very, very well-known TED Talk. And I viewed this TED Talk and I was like, wow, what an amazing TED. I was like, this was like a great TED Talk. And so I
Mhm.
was like, oh my God, if this person can say this all in like 18 or 19 minutes, my God, their book must be amazing.
Yeah.
And it was exactly the opposite. There was nothing more that I got out of the book than I
Mhm.
did out of it. So I got more value per minute out of watching the TED Talk than I did I got nothing more out of the book.
Yeah. And really the brand is also about the essence of something, isn't it? So so, when you waffle, when there's a lot of stuff around the essence, then the essence gets diluted, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I totally get why you would write a book like that in that way. It
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I wanna get that book and put it on my coffee table, and then I want people to come round to my house and pick it up and say, "I've never seen a book like that before," and I'll say, "I know that guy. I know that guy. He's Google's number one rebranding expert, and and Grant Cardone and people from Shark Tank, they think that he is brilliant with branding."
Love it. I love it. You're
Yeah.
hired. You're hired.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, David, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you tonight. We've had such a fantastic conversation. I personally enjoyed it. I know that my viewers and listeners will have really got a lot out of it as well. So,
100%.
yeah. So just to kind of finish up, if people wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Certainly. Well, I would say, I mean, for sure, they can introduce themselves, connect on LinkedIn. That's a very easy way. But if they wanted to visit my website, there's a free ebook. There's a lot of great content, amazing content there. We're actually doing a wonderful brand update on the website itself, and that's risingabovethenoise.com. risingabovethenoise.com, and
Mhm.
lots of goodies there. Lots of goodies there that will that you will. I will warn you right now. You'll get hooked. You'll love it. People will all of a sudden ask you, "Did you get a facelift? Have you lost some weight? What's going on here? Have you got a new haircut? Something's good. Something's different about you all of a sudden." So
Yeah, and it's like, no, like I've just got all this kind of incredible stuff coursing through my brain that is just, making me kind of vibrate with electricity and fireworks every single morning, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much again. It has been a total pleasure. And yeah, look forward to keeping in touch.
Absolutely, Jane. Well, thank you so much. You've been a very, very, very gracious and very, very nice to speak with you as well.